Good day, everyone, and welcome to yet another inspiring, educational, and fun, that's the most important part of this, fun episode of the Global Conversations webcast. So today I have the honor, the privilege, the basically everything to do with our guest. It is any adjectives, a good adjective you can have. This is what my guest is all about. So today I have Marcia Goddard. So Marcia and I have known each other for a very short time, but I've really gotten to know her work. She comes with a very unique experience, which we'll talk about in our recording. And she's a neuroscientist, but she also runs her own company as for the Contentment Foundation, and she's also a high performance culture expert. And she's looking to blaze the trails, if you will, bridging the gap between science and business. And also she's been on several podcasts. One of the podcasts that she was on with Vivian Aqua, where she talked about her culture and food and whatnot. And safe to say, because she's also half Trinidadian like me, we get along even better. So, and one more thing, and of course we'll dive into a little bit of a context in terms of her work and in terms of her passions, if you will. So with all that introduction, I want to introduce you to Marcia. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you very much, and no pressure.
There's no pressure. This is all chill. I mean, you're chill now, and that's the way it's going to be. So yeah, so definitely this is something that I'm looking forward to. So with all of that, I want to start off by letting you have the floor and telling the audience, what is unique. First of all, let's talk about your career, your passions, etc. How did you land into the work that you do right now? Tell us about your journey.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and the answer always varies. I mean, there are obviously things that I always mention, but I always say I don't have a career. I just do stuff, and I like what I do, and one thing follows the next. Because I started out like my bachelor's and master's degrees are in psychology, so I was planning on being a clinical neuropsychologist. I worked in clinical practice. As I was getting my PhD in neuroscience. So I was working as a psychologist, I was researching the brain, got my PhD, then decided, all right, I want to be an assistant professor. I'm going to choose academia. Did that for a little while until I realized this is not it for me, because I'm not doing anything. I'm just writing grant proposal after grant proposal. I'm getting very good at handling rejection. But I don't like this, and I don't like the politics involved in academia, and I don't like the racism, sexism, and all of the other stuff that you have to deal with. So I went into the business world, and at first I applied for jobs. I didn't know what to apply for. What do you apply for when you have my background? It was all clinical and research, so I didn't know. And neither did the people I applied with, because they were like, what are you doing here? literally one response was, yeah, I don't know what to do with you. So it was a little disheartening, to say the least.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to use my background. I really wanted to be scientific. I wanted to help people. I wanted to focus on the brain and behavior and all of those things that I had been focusing on. I just didn't want to do it in an academic context. So I decided to just say yes to anyone who wanted to drink coffee with me. And one of those people was a highly successful entrepreneur here in the Netherlands, where I live. And he asked if I would have a phone call with him. We had a phone call. We talked about psychology and about assessments and about organizational culture. And then he said, just like the other person, he said, yeah, I don't really know what to do with you, but I think there's a lot we can do. So I'm going to give you a job as a neuroscientist within my organization. You're going to study our culture, because they were hiring like 50 to 80 people a month. So it was like hyper growth. And he said, we can use your help. So that's how my corporate career, so to speak, started. And that evolved into what it is now, where I run Contentment for Business, which is a nonprofit that helps organizations with challenges related to sustainable high performance. So what do you do? How do you get people to perform to the best of their abilities in a sustainable way? And that involves well-being. And that involves a lot of diversity and inclusion work,
Mhm.
because obviously you cannot have high performance without that. So it's been a journey. It still is. I have stopped predicting where I'll be next year, well, where I'll
Yeah.
be in 5 years, because Lord knows, but I've loved every second of it.
Yeah. And that is, we'll touch upon it more later. And one of the things I want to know about you is, I mean, I might know the answer, but I want other people to figure it out, is, as you've been going through this journey,
Yeah.
what is the one thing that people don't know about you outside of the LinkedIn world, outside of the social media world, outside of your world, if you will? What is the one thing that people don't know about you that is unique? That you bring energy to, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you mentioned outside of LinkedIn, because anybody who's ever spent more than a second on my LinkedIn will know this.
Yes.
When you see me, I am light skinned, not white, but light skinned, tanned, so to speak. Big curly hair, brown eyes. I'm a woman. Um, that brings certain stereotypes.
Yep.
But what
Yep.
people don't expect is that I literally know everything there is to know about mainly the behavioral side of Formula One.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. The
Yeah.
neuroscience of high performance, the neuroscience of racing, what goes on in drivers' minds, how do their cultures operate, why do they make the decisions that they make. I love analyzing that stuff. I've integrated it into my job, actually, and my entire marriage is based on my love of Formula One. Because when my husband learned that I was a car geek, we were on WhatsApp, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was about cars. And then I said, "Oh, one of my favorite cars is, back then it was the Ferrari LaFerrari."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "You know the Ferrari LaFerrari?" It's like, "Yeah, I know a bunch of other cars too." And that's how we started dating.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's what people expect when they see me.
Yeah. But now people watching, whoever going to be watching this, will
Yeah,
see behind you are a couple of cars, right? So I
there
mean,
are. Yeah.
So what are those
Yeah, I don't
cars
know if you can
behind
see
you?
all of them. Yeah.
Well, I see the two main ones
uh,
behind you. So what are they? I see the third one behind your head, but yeah, the Mercedes.
yeah, so this big one, this is the McLaren. They're all Lego. These are Lego
Yeah.
cars.
Okay. Okay.
So that's the McLaren, and that is the Bugatti. And we're in the process of getting the Ferrari up here as well. I have a really
Okay.
good deal with my husband. So every birthday or Father's Day or whatever, whenever I have the chance to buy a present, I get him one of these. He's an engineer and he loves tinkering with Legos. I like it, but not enough to make something like this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
he puts them together, and then I get to hang them up.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm a,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm a huge F1 person because of the fact that most of the races are, um, most of the races are 6 hours ahead, 7 hours ahead, except for the
Yeah,
races that are
yeah.
here in, say, Montreal or Las Vegas
Hmm.
or wherever the American ones decide to place the race. And yeah, so most of the time the races are 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, I don't know if I want to do this. So I
I
just,
have to,
I've, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
respect Formula One fans on that side of the planet. Although I do
yeah.
have to say, if I was in that position, I'd still do it. I just love it too much. Like, we
Yeah.
literally, it's going to sound a little obsessive, but we schedule our vacations around the Formula One season. And if we can't do that, then we will watch when we're on vacation.
Oh
It's
my
just,
gosh.
that's how dedicated we
That is
are.
obsessive. That is totally obsessive. And that's the thing. It's like, okay, that is even more unique than anything else. I didn't expect that to come out. I mean, like,
Yeah.
F1, and I mean, I guess we can, before we get to our webcast, I mean, I want to know specifically, there was such commentary around the Las Vegas race and how
Oh,
poorly it
gosh,
was
yeah.
done. So of course, this is not a neuroscience, but this is more of an F1 kind of question. So what was your take on that race, how it was done and all of that? Like, yeah.
I mean, it was smart. It was smart because they're trying to break into the US, right? It's growing. Like they have traction in the US now. Drive to Survive is massively popular. It's brought in a
Right.
whole new fan base. So I know that they have to do things if they want to bring in the American fans, they have to do things the American way. So we can
Right.
have all sorts of opinions about it, but if they love it, then who are we to complain? What I
Yeah.
didn't like, obviously, was the fact that they had to kick out the fans because they had all sorts of issues. I hope they work out those kinks for next year. I personally, as a fan, like they had this whole pre-show where there was, I think there were like 15 bands. I watched
Yeah.
and I was like, but where are the drivers? And it was 15 bands. And then all the drivers came up with like an elevator. They were elevated onto a platform for like 10 seconds and that was it. So from my perspective, that's not necessarily why I watch Formula One. I love music. I love concerts. So nothing
Yeah. Yeah.
against
Yeah.
that. But who are we to judge? Like a lot of people were there and they had an amazing time. I wish they would lower the prices though. Like that's from
Oh
an
yeah. Yeah.
equity
Don't even.
perspective.
Yeah.
It's
Don't
yeah,
even start about the one in Montreal. It is pricing
really.
is just, oh yeah, it is off the charts. Like
Oh
hotel rooms are off the
yeah,
charts. To attend is off the charts. Like you basically, first of all, to get
yeah,
tickets, you need to do it at least the day after the race happens, or whenever
yeah.
they decide to sell tickets. It's probably like a year to 9 months in advance. You got to get them then.
Mm-hmm.
Then also too, like I
Yeah,
said, booking the hotels and all that. It's just, yeah, it is one spectacle. And Montreal is a very well respected race globally.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so and it's on a closed course as opposed to the road course in Vegas, right? And we don't
yeah,
have the same spectacle as Vegas. And Vegas is, obviously all show. So they're going to do their American show Vegas way of how to do things. But
yeah.
anyway, be that as it may, obviously we're going to talk
The
a little bit
race was
more.
great, by the way. The race,
Yeah.
the
You liked
Las
it?
Vegas Grand Prix, the race. Oh my God, that
A
was
lot of people didn't.
amazing.
From what I heard, a lot of people didn't like it. Like,
I liked
they
it.
didn't like the way it was. The race was. I know there was a complaint. I don't know if it was from Verstappen or someone had complained about the race itself. But yeah,
No,
I don't know.
Verstappen complained before the weekend, and
Right?
I know that there was during free practice. Carlos Sainz, who's one of the drivers for Ferrari, he
Yeah.
hit what you call a manhole cover
Oh
came
yeah, yeah,
off,
yeah, yeah, yeah. That
and
was
it
at the
ruined
yeah,
his car.
yeah,
Yeah, but that was before the race. But the race itself was incredibly spectacular, one of the
yeah,
best of the season. So
yeah.
I'm not complaining about the race.
Yeah, they got to work out their kinks, but we'll see if it happens
Yeah,
because like I said, the American race has fluctuated cities has moved different
yeah,
cities. I believe I don't know
yeah.
if it was last year was in Austin, Texas, I believe. But anyway,
No, they have three now. They have three. They have one in
oh,
Austin, they
right.
have one in Miami, and they have one in Las Vegas, and all three
Oh,
are on the calendar.
oh, okay. See that I didn't know. I thought they rotated for the American
Now
one.
you know.
Now I know. So
No, no,
anyway,
no.
and I'm sure we'll get into the details, the nitty gritty of the teams and how it all relates. But as we
Yes.
digress, and we know this is what makes you unique, and this is what it's going to be all about. So, so getting back to this whole thing about neuroscience, explain.
Mhm.
I know that we in this work, if you will, have different angles. We come from different professions and whatnot. Like for me, I come from an urban planning background, so I see things a little bit from a broader perspective in terms of how cities work. For you, it's, as you mentioned, rightly so, neuroscience. So tell me, how does that relate to this work in and itself?
Everything we do,
Yeah.
everything we say, how we interact with each other, whether or not we're fair, our opinions, our perspectives, our feelings, our convictions are all created in the brain.
Hmm.
So I'm not saying we are our brains. There's a Dutch neuroscientist or neuropsychologist who does say, oh, free
Hmm.
will doesn't really exist. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
But the way we interact with each other is very, very much influenced by the processes that go on in our brains. And I truly believe that if more people understand where their behavior comes from, it's easier to intervene. It's if you understand why you behave a certain way, it's easier to say, hey, if I want to change that, this might be a way that I could do it. So for me, and that goes for anything, well-being, inclusion, all of it, the
Hmm.
foundation of it is brain behavior relationships.
Hmm.
So our brain is is influenced by our experiences, and our experiences are influenced by our brains. So that interplay is so incredibly important. So that's why I truly, truly believe that there is something to be gained by spreading that knowledge, by sharing that knowledge, and by getting people to reflect on their own processes.
Yeah. And so give me an example of a situation. I mean, I know psychological safety is probably something that is really within your field. I might be wrong, but it's probably
No,
something.
you're definitely right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing. It's, psychological safety is something that organizations pride themselves on, or they have a lack of knowledge on. So tell me how would one come to you and say, hey, look, I want to have a different approach to psychological safety in an organization. Tell us how would that work to a leader who's not, they may be well versed in EDI work, but they may not be well versed on the psychological safety side. So how does that scenario play out for you?
In terms of the work that we do, or do you mean what is psychological safety from a neuroscience perspective?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that one, the latter.
Yeah, so I think one of the things to understand is when it comes to changing behavior, motivation is everything, right? So it's not like I'll say, hey, let's lie in that MRI scanner right there. I'll take a picture of your brain and I'll figure out what we need to target. That's not how this works. It's more that the knowledge base of neuroscience informs my work. So the reason that I think it's important to focus on psychological safety is because I understand what it does to the brain. So one of the first steps, usually, when I work with organizations, is to explain that, is to work with the team to help them understand we can all say, yes, psychological safety is important. We kind of sort of feel it, that it's important. We get it instinctively, but there's a deeper layer there. When I explain to people that if you don't have psychological safety, your frontal lobe becomes less efficient. Your frontal lobe shuts down, is what I always say. Obviously, it doesn't completely shut down because you die, but it doesn't function the way it's supposed to function. Then that means that skills like problem solving, skills like analytical thinking, skills like impulse control or inhibition, all of those skills are mediated by the frontal lobe. So those skills decrease in quality. From a high performance perspective, because we can all talk about the human rights aspect of DEI, right? And I fully support that. But I have learned through experience that the performance business case for DEI is more interesting to organizations.
Yeah.
Just a fact.
Yeah.
So from a performance perspective, no matter, even if you don't care about diversity and you don't care about inclusion and you don't care about psychological safety, do you want people to come into your organization, have their frontal lobes shut down, which means they can't do the work as well as they would have if you just gave them some room to be who they are? It's a no-brainer. So the frontal lobe shuts down. What we also get is, we're looking at each other right now, right? And you're listening to me, talking to you, and you have a neutral face. I feel very safe with you. So we're good. We're fine.
Yeah.
But if I didn't feel safe, then that neutral face would be misinterpreted by my brain because I wouldn't feel safe. I'd be in fight or flight mode. I wouldn't feel safe. And my brain would tell me, he doesn't like what you're telling him. He doesn't like this at all. He wishes that he never invited you to be on his podcast. He doesn't like you. He hates you. And it will get worse and worse and worse. And you'll start catastrophizing.
Yeah.
Now imagine that scenario on a team in a virtual meeting where that neutral face is everyone's face. Because that's just the way that meetings are like this. Unless you're the one talking. And then you're looking at all of those faces. So there's a layer of neuroscience that is so crucial to understand because it will motivate people to be like, all right, if I can just change this, I will literally change the connections in my brain. I will change how my brain operates and how I then interact with others. So I don't come in giving lectures. I come in using my knowledge to help them reach their goals.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess, I want to say, there is a little bit of a bias in the sense that we know each other, we're comfortable with each other, but but at the same time, for someone who you don't know, you'll come in, it's like, okay, is this person interesting? And that's how they say in interviews, it's like within the first 30 seconds, that someone is interested in the job or the other person is interested in what they're saying. So there is that component of neuroscience. And, a lot of people, if they don't give them the space to do their work and what they're passionate about, yeah, they're going to shut down, and that's what it's going to be, right? So that is exactly what you're
Well,
saying. How do you?
speaking of those,
Yeah,
yeah, and speaking of those first 30 seconds,
yeah,
if you start a new job, the first thing your brain will do is figure out, am I safe here?
yeah,
First thing. Every time
yeah,
you walk into a room, that's what your brain does.
yeah,
And if you don't feel safe, you won't be at your best. You will mask, you won't be you, you won't perform. So it's the basis of everything.
yeah. And speaking of that performance, let's go back to that F1 context, if you will.
Hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
what led you to get into that, to understand the high performance and leadership within the context of F1 racing? Like and I'm sure that plays out into organizations as well, in terms of what we've discussed in terms
Yeah.
of behavior and culture. So, you know, where do you see that correlation in terms of what they do in getting the best out of their drivers?
Well, there are certain elements to culture in Formula One
Yeah.
that are really conducive to optimizing performance, right? It's basically what F1 has been doing since its inception
Mm-hmm.
50, 60, 70, I don't know, the 70 plus years ago. Um, so I think there's a lot. I spent 3 years talking to as many people as I could who were working in F1 to
Mm-hmm.
learn more about how does their culture operate. Because if we can learn more about organizations, by we I mean organizations, can learn more about how to build that culture, it's really going to help us be sustainable in our high performance, because
Mm-hmm.
they have been high performing for 70 years. And in F1, high performance is literally like, it's not an easy industry to work in. There's like, the pressure is immense and there's a lot of politics. It's not always a friendly environment. There's a lot of competition. It's all about money. If you don't perform, you could be out, like you lose money, and then at some point you won't be able to afford competing anymore. So the stakes are so high. And yet work satisfaction is also high. People are very, very passionate about what they do. So I just got really curious about how do they operate, being a
Mm-hmm.
fan firstly, but then also like this whole thing of studying Formula One team started as a pipe dream that I had
Mm-hmm.
while I was working for an organization, because they, as I said, I got a job as a neuroscientist with one company studying their culture. But the owner of the company was pretty, like, he had some insights. He was like, well, if you can
Mm-hmm.
do that for us, you can also do that for our clients, right? So
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah,
started
yeah,
sending me to his clients. And that's how I started studying organizations and their cultures. And I noticed that there was a common thread of continuous change. We have to deal with continuous change. And we all have to deal with high pressure all the time. We all feel
Mm-hmm.
pressured. Workload is high. We feel like we're under constant pressure. So once I figured that out, I thought, okay, now I know what the culture is like, but how do I figure out how I can help people deal with that better?
Yeah.
How does one deal with that in an optimal way? And that's where Formula One came in. So I just jokingly said to my boss at the time, I said, you know what I should do? I should study Formula One teams. And then we had a good laugh about that, because that doesn't happen. If you don't have any context, that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. But I underestimated myself because I talked my way in just by building relationships. And it's all, I think the thing that helped there is I did research, but it wasn't with the aim of publishing, which is what you have to do when you're in academia. I will never
Yeah.
publish about this. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
write a book about it, but not specifically, I will never publish an academic paper, because that's not what it's about for me. For
Yeah.
me, it's about learning and then applying that knowledge. And that's how these doors opened. And I ended up speaking to, I think I spoke to like 60 people across 6 different teams. And it's given me so many insights that I can still use. And I really, truly believe that there's a lot of value for organizations there.
Yeah. And I think because of the way we've traditionally done this work, a lot of people are stuck in terms of how do they get the best performance out of people. And it's seeped in, traditional ways, if you will, uh, having the traditional bureaucracies and how that all plays out and whatnot. But yet
Yeah.
we don't look at different perspectives. We just basically, this is how we solve it. We solve it by metrics. How many people come into are racialized or marginalized from the global majority. We have all those, right? But we don't look at it from the perspective, and maybe it's just because it's just too difficult for people to understand. And listening to you and watching you be passionate of this work, how can we not look at a different perspective, and how do we address organizational change, organizational culture change, if you will, to address this, to address this by way of neuro inclusion, or sorry, neuro. What am I saying? Neuro inclusion, in terms of neuroscience. So yeah, and that's very fascinating to know in terms of what you can bring to an organization, what you've done, right? Because a lot of people, if leaders are supposed to be curious, why not bring a different perspective in terms of, hey, if this hasn't worked, why not look at it a different way? Especially if we're talking about, like we said, psychological safety. If we're talking about high performance, like you do with F1, right? How do you get them to be that way? How do you get them to perform at their best, given all of these, like, their scenarios are much, much different than a person who is involved in a basic employee who's trying to get up the scale, et cetera, and leadership and all that. So that's what I find interesting about your work is, how do we look at it from a different perspective? And that's important.
Yeah, it's definitely a different perspective. I do want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, and that is that Formula One has a long way to go to become more diverse and inclusive. And Lewis Hamilton is spearheading that initiative, and he is amazing. Everybody should look at the Hamilton Commission, Mission 44, and everything that he's done. But one of the reasons I'm confident and I'm determined to help, I really want to help teams reach their goals, because I do see that there are people in F1 who are motivated to do this. It's just really difficult because the sport has been a guy's game for 70 years. So you don't instantly change that. But the reason I truly believe it is possible is because of their culture. There is a culture of experimentation. There is a culture of psychological safety, because you cannot build a fast car if you don't have people who are comfortable sharing outlandish ideas.
Yeah.
And in essence, inclusion is about the same thing. It's not about outlandish ideas, but it's about different perspectives, right? So if you want to build a fast car, you need to make room for different perspectives. I think that the thing that Formula One struggles with is there are some stereotypes, gender stereotypes, there are racial stereotypes. It's been a rich white man's sport for a very long time, and they need to break through that. They need to let that go, and sort of the biases are strong.
Yeah.
But to everyone thinking that I'm talking out of my right now,
you can say
I'm
it, don't
really
worry.
not. I really believe this.
Yeah.
I'm not talking out of my ass. This can really happen, and neuroscience and psychology can help with this. There is enough knowledge and insights there to really help make this work.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that was one of the points I was going to make is, people coming into this work or wanting to get your input, and they start listening to you talking about F1, and exactly that. F1 is not exactly the most diverse sport. It's the most classist sport, if you will. Auto racing is classist as it is. You have it in the even on our circuit, the Indy kart circuit, whatever it's called now, is they've had one woman involved in that. NASCAR's had a black person involved racing, if you will. But yeah, overall, it is 99% white male. And how do you break those barriers? And right now, of all, from a North American's perspective, people are starting to listen to what Lewis Hamilton is saying and what he's doing, and how he's trying to fight for equity. Not only from a global perspective, but given F1 is a global brand, how do you develop that into an organization and see that there is a correlation, regardless of what the situation is? Don't think of it from the perspective of, we are, F1 is elitist, it's classist, it's mainly white males who are in this. But look at it from an organization perspective, and also look at it from a performance perspective. Because if you want to get your employees on a level of high performance, although their situations are much different in the sense of the various scenarios that they have to go through, it's sitting in a car in a little seat, but yet you can still learn a lot from them, right? And I think that's the nature of this story here is what can you learn from F1 as a whole, from the perspective of a driver in terms of scenarios. And that's what I see coming out of this, an important part of the conversation.
Yeah. And also it's good to realize that it's the driver is one element, but
Right.
there's a whole team, and there are people who work in F1 who just go to the office every day.
Yeah.
They just work at an office. The factory is their office. And a lot of them don't go to the races. They go to the office and then they go home. They're part
Yeah.
of that high performance environment though. And that's where I think that's why it draws me in so much from a professional perspective. Because I mean, I also like football. I love tennis. I love hockey. I love all of these other sports, and
Yeah.
those are high performance too.
Right.
But I think the special thing about Formula One is that it has that sport element, but then it also has a corporate element to it. So there are
Yeah.
some similarities there. And I think it's not about the driver. It's not, like you say, it's not about what exactly it is that they do, but it's about the building blocks of their culture: autonomy, trust, psychological safety, clear communication. All of those things are things that you can implement in any work environment to be more successful.
Yeah. And it's not, and it's not as complex as it really sounds. It's how do you get your employees, especially those from from the global majority, racialized and marginalized people, how do you get them to be at the highest level possible if you are giving them that space to be psychologically safe, but having a full comprehension of what that really means? Because a lot of, at least from what I've experienced, a lot of organizations, although they talk a big game about psychological safety, they don't really do it in action, because they don't really know how to give them the space, they talk so much about innovation, right? F1 is a perfect example of innovation, right? How do you get stagnant, traditional bureaucratic organizations to become innovative and learn about, the neuroscientific facts of psychological safety? Those are the things that come to my mind in terms of this.
Yeah. And then what we do with Contentment for Business is obviously we take it one step further, and that is we have we call it the Applied Psychological Safety Certification Program. And that word applied is so incredibly important, because if I just come in and I'll be like, okay, so if you don't have psychological safety, this is what happens in the brain, and this is what happens if you do have it. Now you know what it is. Good luck.
Yeah.
Then they're like, okay, thank you. And then they'll be inspired, and then they'll be like, I don't know what to do now. So that applied program really focuses on, very practically, say you have to organize a meeting. How do you do that in a way that is psychologically safe? As in, what do you say? What do you do really concretely to have people come in and think, I know what to expect here. I know what is expected of me. I know what I can do to contribute. And I feel heard, seen, and respected for my opinions.
Yeah.
That's the environment that you want to create. So we teach people how to do that, instead of just sticking with definitions and then say, this is the definition, this is how you measure it.
Yeah.
Go forth. We take it one step further than that.
Yeah. And that's really important in the fact that there's a different and unique perspective in all of this work. And this is why I like hearing, because, if we've been doing, like you said, going back to F1 again, they've been doing this work for 70 years. They have their unique skill sets they expect, but they still need to change as an organization. How does that look for executives who are leading these organizations, and how might shape their the conversations within the organization, et cetera. So looking futuristically here, how do you see this all playing out for organizations in terms of bringing a neuroscientific perspective for saying the future of equity inclusion?
I mean, I can only hope that there will be more people out there. I know that I live in the Netherlands, and there are some startups here that are using neuroscientific insights, and there are other companies that do the same. I hope I get, so to speak, more competition, because I think if you want to address the root cause of the challenges that there are in terms of DE&I, I think neuroscience is an element of that. If you want to facilitate effective behavioral change, neuroscience is going to be an element in that. So I think my vision for the future, let's see if I can manifest this, is that every organization will start thinking about it from that perspective. They don't all have to hire neuroscientists, but if they start thinking about it from that perspective, then that at least means that they're going beyond diversity categories, which right now
Yeah.
is kind of sometimes where it gets stuck.
Yes.
And if they start thinking about, oh, wait, we brought in this person and the value of that person isn't in their skin color and it's not in their boobs, it's in their brains.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, you know what I mean, right? It's not the
Yeah. Yeah.
package.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
package
It's not
looks
the
different,
physical,
and
right?
that's why we call
Exactly.
it diversity.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
it's in the fact that because they have those attributes,
Yeah.
they have different life experiences, and that
Yeah.
changes the way their brain operates, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
where the value is. So
Yeah.
if we can get to that as that to be universally accepted, then I think we're going to make some big strides in the right direction.
Yeah. I mean, look, at least on the North American perspective, the business or the way culture is right now, it's stagnant, right? We need straight up kick in
Yeah.
the ass in terms of this work, right? Because, as you rightly or wrongly see what's going on this side of the world, where within one context, within the American context, and that's a whole different story in and itself. But whether they're talking about the decline of DEI and within organizations, Elon Musk
Yeah.
shooting his mouth off, all that shit. But anyway, besides the point, right? But yeah,
Not
but
completely beside the point, though, because it does
yeah,
have an impact, right?
yeah, it does have an
Yeah.
impact, and that's the thing. It's like, where do those conversations need to happen, and how do we give it a boost without going in these circles of like, oh yeah, we're going to look at the metrics, we're going to develop programs, we're going to bring new people in, etc. Okay, well, what does that mean for your behavior? And we know behavior is hard to change, but with your work from the neuroscience perspective, that has a huge impact on how people have a performance. So that comes with a whole different level of understanding this work. And I think it's very important. And I mean, even though, I can talk about it from the perspective of developing urban spaces, if you will, right? You can have the space of, creating parks, and you can have green spaces. You can let artists flourish within a space. If you don't give that, your city's gonna die, right? If you don't have those diverse perspectives, that innovation within a city, right? And that's what it is. And if you don't have people allowing people to flourish the way they do or way they can, then it doesn't work out for a municipality, doesn't work out for an organization as a whole. And it's very important for people to understand the value of neuroscience in this work, and they need to take risks in understanding why this is the case, right? And I think that's what you bring to this work, and it's very important that we understand this. And I definitely appreciated listening to this and watching you and listening to your passion behind this, because it makes a lot of sense, and a lot of people need to hear more about this. And I'm hoping that at least on this side of the world, that they watch our conversation, they listen to what you had to say, because I think it's a very important thing, that it's an important concept that people need to really understand and hone in on, in terms of how do you retain your employees without them leaving. Because there's obviously, like you say, you can go back to F1. If someone leaves Ferrari to go to Mercedes, right? There's a cost involved there, right? Cost of bringing them in, cost of leaving, cost of hiring. Like, there's a whole slew of that. That's the same thing with an organization, right? If they leave, there's a whole new cost, right? And that's all tied to psychological safety, right? So we brought it full circle for people to really understand.
Yeah, I appreciate all of what you just said. Thank you so much. And I for me, it's I'm not an activist. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a scientist. So I come at it from that perspective. But I am an activist in the sense that I really, really, really want to have a positive impact on the world, and that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do. So thank you for acknowledging that. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I've, like I said, I've gotten to know you over the last few months and appreciate all the work that you do. And yeah, it's an important conversation. It has an impact on people. And like I said, like I've been saying the last little while, it's about basic humanity, And that's what we're trying to achieve here. Whether you're an activist or a pragmatist, I'm a pragmatist too in this work. And yeah, but at the end of the day, we want to be humans after all, respect each other, and let them bring them whole selves to their work so that it doesn't have any implications down the road. So I want to thank you, Marcia, for this conversation. I sincerely hope that a lot of people who are watching or listening to our conversation take this back, especially to their organizations. I know for myself, I'm going to, basically just share this conversation with a lot of people, not only within my network, but hopefully, within your network, and see that there's a different perspective in terms of how this work should be done. And and I'm grateful that this is something that I've learned about from you. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And so as we close this wonderful, wonderful, inspiring conversation between Marcia and I want to close off by just asking you just a brief little question in terms of a wild card. So what is the one song or one book that inspires you every day, right, as we speak at this moment?
Okay, can I please give 3 answers to this?
Yeah.
Because there are 3.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead.
So the book, and Vivian Aqua, who you mentioned in the beginning, will know what I'm going to say now. The book is Behave by Robert Sapolsky. It's very big. Do I have it here? I have it here. This is it. Behave, Robert Sapolsky. This is how big it is.
Oh, boy. Okay.
This is how small the letters are.
Oh, yeah.
27 hours of audio. But it explains why we do what we do. It explains the relationship between the brain and behavior in a way that is completely understandable. There's just a lot of information in that. That's why it's good. So that's the book. Everybody get that book. It's good. Songs. I mean, I'm a musician's daughter, so narrowing it down is tricky for me, but I'm going to choose 2 that in this moment are the ones that come to mind. The first is Sam Cooke, A Change Is Going to Come. Just pure soul, obviously the anthem of the civil rights movement. Sam Cooke's story is incredibly inspiring. So that one, when you hear him sing, it's like you can feel it. I love that. I love the message as well. Yeah. And the second one is a song called Fix You, but not the Coldplay version, but the version by a group called Naturally 7. They're a vocal harmony group. They call it vocal play. So they sing a cappella, but it's not just a cappella singing. They do a guitar, they do a drum, they have the actual instruments in their voices. Yeah. And for me, it shows how different all their voices are so different, and if you bring them together the right way and you give everyone room to shine, you create these amazing harmonies. And that really shows in that song, the cover that they did of Fix You by Coldplay. So Naturally 7, look them up, go to their shows. They're absolutely fantastic, and they're really, really nice guys as well. So those are my 3 answers.
Well, hey, it's better than none. That's all I say, right? So So with that, how can, besides your LinkedIn, naturally, that's where a lot of people will find you, but how else can people reach you?
So for me, I'm working on my new website. It's going live soon, marciagoddard.com. Okay. So that's one way. LinkedIn is obviously the second one. And if they want to learn more about the Contentment Foundation, a nonprofit in which I am the founder of Contentment for Business, they can go to contentment.org.
Okay. All right. Well, that wraps up another episode of Global Conversations. Don't hesitate to subscribe, like this podcast, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have a lot of people liking this podcast and webcast, if you will. If they don't, shame on them. But anyway, that's how it is.
Exactly.
And, exactly. So yeah, definitely share this episode with your colleagues at work, those within the profession, and definitely take a lot of notes with this with our session. So thank you again, Marcia, for this. I really appreciate it. And until next time, I bid you adieu. Thank you, everyone.